fact, most of us are actually sharing some of that, which is wonderful. Now, what I'm going to talk about is probably going to be sort of a pickup from where Anshu, who I believe is one of the modern India's history, would write him someday of the great mission he's carrying out at Bruges, and also about something which the speaker on video had talked about. I'm going to talk about target 3 with a lot of zeros. That's 3 billion. And why 3 billion is important? That was the title of our book, published in 2011, in which Dr. Kalam and myself co-authored it. 3 billion represents two things. One is the rural population of the world, and the second, almost, the below poverty line population of the world. The big number we talked about. Let's, and most of you are MBAs, are people who are into some form of analytics. So let's, on the first step, the first principle, the Zeroth law, is observation. Right, the engineer, the MBA, the businessman. Observe this picture. Let's observe visual observation. What do you see? I want you to see the man who's wearing a Gandhian topi, Gandhian top. I want you to observe the primitive hull or the plow which he's carrying. By the way, this picture is from Loni, which is near Shirdi in Maharashtra. The people are trying to grow sugarcane. It's a sugarcane trade. Look at the plow, which is about 100 years behind its current history. Look at who's pulling the plow. It's two women. Observe that one of the women is in school uniform. Observe that the women are bare feet and the man is wearing shoes. This is one of the areas where we worked on our model of PURA, providing urban amenities in rural areas. And it reflects a lot of issues, or problems, or challenges which rural India, about 750 million people face. Education, empowerment of women, technology, about the fact that there is an issue of recognition. And you go to his house, the same man, you go to the house and you'll find him serving you a very popular brand of cola, and it makes you observe that a bottle of Coca-Cola can reach this man's house, but technology, seeds, empowerment cannot. And with that premise, we build on the model of PURA, which ultimately led to the book and also a national policy. But before I begin on the nitty-gritties of that, just have a look at this graph. You guys love graphs, I know. Most of you are engineers. This is a graph which talks about the disparity between the richest 20% of the world versus the poorest 20% of the world. So how many times the richest were richer by the poorest 20%. And it begins at about 1830. And you look how, just observe it. Does it have a laser? Just observe here. It goes like this, and this is the war period. This is the Marshall Plan. This is where the Second World War reconstruction is happening. So it's relatively stabilized, and then it shoots up again. So from about three times to about 75 times. This is how the disparity in the world income has moved. And in case you are one of those environmentalists, how many of you are environmentalists? No one. Okay. Good. Back to environment. Just compare it. This is how the carbon concentration, this. Interestingly, this is how the carbon concentration in the environment has moved in parts per million, roughly in the same trend as the divide in incomes. So in a way, the disparity in income is beautifully captured in the way the ecology has degraded. Now I want to talk to you about our model itself. And I'm going to not get into details of it. I'm going to just pick up some examples that you worked and try to establish a thread around it. The first picture comes from a place called Amritsar, southern Gujarat. Amritsar is well known for something called chiku. Chiku is a fruit which is fleshy, can be easily destroyed, extremely sweet, and can be used for a variety of purposes. I assume all of you would have consumed it at some stage. Now the problem of this area was, now chiku fruit has a few problems is that it has to be graded because it comes in different sizes. So size grading has to be done. And more importantly, there is a huge issue that the product is extremely perishable. And this area was continuously facing this challenge as individual farmers that they could not stack it and transport it quickly, which was pushing the prices down. So what happened here over the past about 10 years is that these farmers have started working on a cooperative model, which is largely based on this kind of, this is a technology, it's like a centrifuge, similar technology which actually separates uranium from plutonium. It's a centrifuge which basically pulls out the high density chiku from the low density chiku, and then they would store it, and there is a particular rail which started running about in late 1990s, which is called the Chiku Express, manned by the Indian Railways, which travels from Amritsar to Delhi. And these chiku are the ones which are being served in the Azadpur Mandi of Delhi using that physical connectivity. So our first step towards realizing PURA focuses on physical connectivity, actually helping logistics and people and all kinds of products move faster. Let's move on to the next picture. This picture is from a place in Dharwad, in a small village up the hills called Kalkeri. Kalkeri, and this girl, this beautiful little girl, is called Samosi. No points for guessing what is her favorite snack. Samosi and many other barfis and ibartis over there are basically children who are usually orphan or have a single parent life, and they are okay. Now this is very dark, but there is a gentleman here, two white faces. Okay, so this person is called Matthew, and that other one is a Canadian called Adam. And these people have set up a music school over there called Kalkeri Sangeet Vidyalaya, which is right on top of the hills, operating out of a few huts. It's a normal school in normal hours, and as in the video we were being shown, beyond the school, it's a music academy. And all these children are handpicked from across all the villages and brought into this school, which is completely free and operates on Skype. Skype, right? Modern tool which you use to do a lot of stuff. But in this case, it is being used to actually connect musicians. For example, if you're a good guitarist, can you give a lesson on Skype to Samosi or someone else? Can you run these electronically connected schools of music? Samosi is a great violin player. She's about 8, 9 perhaps. Nobody knows really. In rural India, nobody knows their age. It's almost 8, 10, 12, 12. Nobody knows. So she's about the 8, 10 category and plays violin. A violin is a difficult instrument to play if you're a musician. You have to hold it like this, and it's a painful process. I can't do it. But it's a beautiful sight to see that a girl of her age and many other girls would play instrumentally. And this is exactly how electronic connectivity in a small village of Kalkeri up the hill in the district of Dharwad in northern Karnataka is helping children from their underprivileged background realize their creativity and their educational value. And that's how electronic connectivity, that's the second model of electronic connectivity, physical, electronic. This is a picture from Chitrakoot, where one of our NGO-based PURAs, providing urban amenity rural area complex, operates. It operates across a cluster of about 500 villages. Chitrakoot is a very significant mention in Hindu mythology because Lord Ram apparently spent some time over there. And this Chitrakoot Pura is operated by an NGO called DRI, which takes it across to 500 villages. In this case, okay, this is a model farm. This farmer, it's called Rama Kalam, is holding this is a model farm which they set up. And so the problem is that a lot of rural places, if you go out there, it's very difficult to start explaining that, okay, you take up this technology or use this fertilizer, this kind of seed. So what these guys did was something very innovative and very fundamental. Learning by doing, learning by example, leading by example or learning by doing. So what they did was that they picked up 1.5 acre, and this is 2.5 acre. 2.5 and 1.5 acre model farms, which is the average farm holding size in that area. And they would work out a 5-member or a 6-member family experiment, how to use your farm to realize the expenses which you have to incur on the family upkeep. And with that, they would bring in farmers in this model farm. It will be like an internship model which you guys do. They'll come there, work for a couple of months, and go back nearby villages and do in the same agroclimatic conditions, do similar technology farming. And that actually spurred on a lot of farmers to adopt. The adoption challenge was taken care of. But that requires a lot of localized, customized knowledge, not knowledge which is done at scientific labs. Of course, that is also important, or management technologies developed at big IIMs, but grassroots level connect. And that's how knowledge connectivity is of PURA. The third layer is knowledge connectivity is transforming Ramata and many others in this 500 village cluster. And this one is my personal favorite. The girl on the yellow one is Sarita, and this one is Vinita, the purple one, Vinita. And this is in a small place in Maharashtra near Kolhapur. And the story is like this. I was visiting this place, and we were doing some survey in a health center, and there came a woman, must have been about 16, 17 perhaps, and she says, you please come, I want to show you something. Unscheduled visit, but sometimes accidents bring out the best. So we decided to go there, and she took us to this little center, and this is the temple area of the center, which is basically like a daycare center, which is not exactly a daycare, but like a children's hostel. It's like one of the hostels. It started as a daycare and ended up in being a hostel. And this is for run and for women affected by HIV. And these are all single mothers who have lost their husbands and are affected by HIV. And they operate the center with the help of a local medical institution. It's called Pravara Nagar Medical University, who helps them operate this. The story goes like this. Many of these women who are operating this center were tribal. In fact, all of them were tribal. And in India, a lot of tribal areas have a custom of marrying women extremely young. And when I say extremely young, it means 12 years. 12 years, 13 years, 14 years, 12 to 14 bracket. And these women were married to men who were not in the hills, who were on the plains, who were richer, and who in this case were often truck drivers. Truck drivers of 45 years of age marrying a 12, 14-year-old woman, 15-year-old woman, often as a second, third wife, not exactly a wife, technically. And the irony is that many of these truck drivers is a community which is highly affected by HIV. These women contracted HIV from their husbands. They were labeled as prakop, like a bad omen, because their husbands passed away subsequently. And they were left out in the streets with probably a child, or maybe a child with them and one inside them. And nobody would take them back. It's an absolute no. They can't go back to their family, it's not allowed, they can't stay with their in-laws because they're not even legally married. And these women then went to this particular university where students like a lot of you, probably younger than you, got together with their professors and started a whole activism campaign in the local area, which included all kinds of stuff, including Hirao, the district collector. And they finally got their right. India is a country which runs a free anti-HIV drug program, one of the few countries in the world, if not the only. And they were denied their rights, so these guys fought for their rights. And not only fought for their rights, it was also built income-generating ability. Simple activities like making papad and connecting or making these bangles, but in a way where markets are connected with the production centers and they know what to manufacture. There's a computer which tells them what to manufacture. And with that, they were able to generate economic activities with which they are operating this center, which has about 100 children. And that is how economic connectivity is helping Sarita and Vinita realize their potential. So I asked them, when you come across the children, one thing I picked up from Dr. Kalam was to ask them, "Bade hoke kya banoge? Bade hoke kya banoge? What will you do when you grow up?" And inadvertently you just word out this question. It's only after you said it you realize that in a community of children, most of whom are affected by AIDS or HIV at least, the question has its own connotations. But let's not put despair, the cloud of despair on hope. This girl, this purple one, replies, I'm going to say this in Hindi. मैं बड़ी होके डॉक्टर बनूंगी। मैं डॉक्टर इसलिए बनूंगी क्योंकि मैंने अपनी सारी जिंदगी और गौर कीजिए 8 साल की जिंदगी मैंने अपनी माँ को बीमार देखा है। When I grow up, I'll become a doctor because all my life of 8 years, I've seen my mom sick, and this is how hope plays a big role in inspiring who we would call underprivileged people. This is what, for a long time, I worked with Dr. Kalam on these ideas, and this core connectivity, physical, electronic, knowledge, and economic, infused with some locally available innovations, locally available enterprises, we were able to create systems and subsystems within them, which could help the profit-sucking centers, the rural areas of India, where nothing comes out, only people go in and money goes in, nothing would ever return. We were trying to transform that. That became a national policy. All these centers, which is now covering roughly close to 10,000 villages, are all profit-making centers. But this probably reads a little wrong. So I left the OSD position in about February, spurred on by these examples and a few others. And then I decided to probably work at the very grassroots itself. So the first thing I did was to spend a few days, 2 or 3, actually sleeping in areas like the North Place. Anyone of you from Delhi? A few of you from Delhi. Have you been to Connaught Place? Have you seen Connaught Place as, and this is the center of India, well, Rajiv Chowk and Indira Chowk, center of probably the most important market in India, which shows disparity at its best. On one side, you have the best markets, the most upmarket possible. And on the other side, you'll find a layer and layer of children who are begging. And most of them, and we all know it's a GK now, that most of the children are abducted or brought into this particular stream against their wishes, often against their parents' wishes, nobody knows, and they're brought from all over the country. In very front of our eyes, lives are being destroyed, and there's very little we, sitting in the North Place, are able to do about it. So I said, spend some time, there's no time, it's already up, so I'm not going to tell you about that experience. But then we started this little experiment, which we called Nukkad Paltan. It's a very small initiative right now. But the idea of Nukkad Paltan was to use something which Dr. Kalam once told me, and it's in all his books, is about how he became what he became. And he became what he became because he was a newspaper seller at the age of 8 to 10 in 1940 around. And that was the age when the Luftwaffe, which was the German Air Force, was fighting a battle with the Royal Air Force in the Battle of England. There's an Air Force battle. And he was a newspaper seller, and this is pre-independent India. And the headline was always that these two pilots are clashing with each other. And that's how an 8-year-old boy saw inspiration to be a pilot. He didn't know how to become one. So he went out in his village and searched out a person who's called Pakshi Mangalam Shastri, who actually was also his teacher. And he taught him that to become a pilot, you have to do X, Y, Z, do aerodynamics and all sorts of stuff. The child was so inspired that he ended up studying for all these things, physics, mathematics, aerodynamics. He could not become a pilot, but he became the president of India. And then he flew the plane. We wanted to work on children and use dreams and careers are different. We are not doing career counseling. So we want to work with these little children out on the streets and give them dream counseling. Make them dream big, make them dream impossible. You might not make a Nobel laureate, but you make a top scientist. So we started this initiative, and finally, as I conclude, I've got one message for you, which is from Mahatma Gandhi. Be the change you want to see. Thank you.